Good day and welcome to the Literate Patriot. I'm Amber Brehan. Today I wanted to cover the first Republican presidential debate of 2016, a debate that was the equivalent of Mount Rushmore crumbling to the ground, with fact-adverse moderators that make you wonder even if they could fact-check the Republican presidential candidates, would they? Probably not. An example of this was the moderators' purposeful misrepresentation of Democratic presidential candidate Bernie Sanders' tax plan, stating that it was 90%. And this is something that Bernie Sanders has repeatedly stated he has not said. Another example of this is the Iran nuclear trade deal. Both the moderator and the presidential candidate stated that the United States would be writing a check to the state of Iran. This is not true. The total amount of money that Iran will be able to make will be because sanctions will be lifted and Iran will be able to participate in the world economy more fully. This was a deliberate misrepresentation of facts on the part of moderators. While this is something that the electorate has come to expect from the Republican presidential candidates, because the bar has been set pretty low, this is something that was a bit unexpected coming from the moderators. I guess we'll have to set the bar a bit lower. Another theme coming out of this first Republican presidential debate of 2016 were the recursive answers about the United States falling into the abyss of hell. This theme was supported by answers from the Republican presidential candidates about the economy, which is apparently tanking and in free-for-all, and about ISIL, who is apparently parked off of the East Coast in submarines. Another major theme was ISIL overall. A majority of this debate focused on ISIL and what the presidential candidates plan to do about ISIL. This was pretty surprising, kind of, because we don't know where any of these candidates stand on ISIL, and none of the previous Republican debates focused on ISIL before. In fact, the more I listened to this debate, the more scared I became for the state of America, the more worried I became, the more concerned I became about my job security, the less concerned I became about the environment, the more concerned I became that every Muslim that lives within a 5-mile radius had a bomb tucked under their shirt. I suddenly realized at about the 2-hour mark that if this rhetoric were all the rhetoric that I heard, and I were not exposed to the actual facts, because the moderators weren't going to present the actual facts and they weren't allowed to live fact-check the presidential candidates, and as I stated before, even if they were allowed to fact-check the presidential candidates, they probably wouldn't do so, I'd probably be a Republican. Based on what the Republican presidential candidate stated during this debate, the economy is in its own sort of free-for-all, ISIL is on the doorstep of every American, the president is trying to take away everyone's guns, nothing is okay, and we should all be terribly concerned about the state of our nation. And this idea of the world ending or the United States sliding into the abyss of hell wasn't capped at the Republicans' typical rhetoric. Republican presidential candidate Ben Carson decided to come up with his own hypothetical situation of a hydrogen bomb being detonated and what would happen then, because Republicans aren't scared enough based on the rhetoric that Republican presidential candidates and other Republican leaders are spouting off at them. Another noticeable theme, and nothing that is surprising, is that the president and Hillary Clinton are always wrong, but most notably that the president is always wrong, even when asked about gun control measures and what to do about increasing mental health care. Jeb Bush said it best. Jeb Bush couldn't bring himself to say that he agreed with the president and the president's increased spending on mental health care. Instead, what Jeb Bush decided to say was, you don't do it by executive action. It doesn't matter that executive actions aren't something President Obama cooked up in the White House. It does not matter that every president has used executive actions. It doesn't matter that George W. Bush used many executive actions. As long as President Obama does anything President Obama does is wrong. And this was a recurring theme throughout the night. Another theme that was unfortunately front and center during this first 2016 Republican debate was the theme that Americans are Americans. This theme was front and center both during the debate on immigration and when Senator Ted Cruz had to defend himself for being born in Canada. And unfortunately, it was this idea that no person should be allowed in the United States, and that people really should be halting all immigration until the immigration system can be looked at and completely overhauled. And that was pretty hypocritical, especially considering the fact that if this had happened in earlier times, Republican presidential candidates Kasich, Trump, Rubio, and Cruz would not be on the debate stage tonight. All of them had foreign-born parents, and all of them, from their parents, ended up traveling to the United States, even if some of them were born in the United States. In the case of Ted Cruz, he was not born in the United States. So this sort of hypocritical rhetoric is very interesting. On the one hand, these Republican presidential candidates are very proud that they have these very diverse backgrounds and they started with so little and were able to have so much and are now running for the highest elected office in the nation. And yet, on the other hand, they're touting their immigration policies, which are to halt all immigration, and in particular immigration from Muslim countries, and especially in particular in the case of Trump. And they don't realize that so many of them have foreign-born parents, have parents that immigrated to the United States. And based on their immigration policies, they would not be running for the highest elected office in the United States today because their parents would not, under their immigration plan, have been allowed to come over to the United States. So there was just a lot of hypocrisy going on during the GOP debate. It was very sad to see. It really showed the sad state of American politics, especially on the Republican side. In terms of who won the debate, the person who probably spoke the most sense in terms of being a Republican was Ohio Governor Kasich. Unfortunately for Kasich, that means nothing. His poll numbers will not rise, and sorry for that, Kasich. In terms of who did the best and whose poll numbers will rise the most because of it, probably Trump, unfortunately. He's probably the next Hitler. Congratulations, Trump. So that's my take on this So that's the Literate Patriot take on the first Republican debate of 2016. It was a very sad state of affairs. At some point, the debate was just very long. We learned absolutely nothing new from the candidates. They continued to espouse this anti-immigration rhetoric. They continued to talk about the broken state of the United States, realizing but continuing to sort of spout off these lies that the economy is broken, that everything is broken, that we're all going to die. And that's simply not true. And unfortunately, the moderators could not fact check them live, and even if they could, I don't believe that they would do so because they didn't ask them any questions from a democratic or fact-neutral perspective. So that's my take. I look forward to reading your comments and your take on this analysis of the 2016 Republican presidential debate.